All right, guys, Crazy here. Let's go over Focus Mage build I've been working on. This is really fun. It's been lots of fun just freezing bosses in place and just crushing them with spells. As you see here, we're freezing the Echo Knight. Normal enemies don't really even stand a chance. Like if you throw a few spells out, it either kills them or freezes them right in place. So you can walk up and get your focus back with just a few auto attacks. The build's awesome. There's a lot of versatility. So as you're getting to your max gear stats, or kind of the gear that's going to allow you to generate focus like infinitely, I've been able to go through a dungeon just with a few auto attacks and be able to get all of my focus back. I've been able to throw fireballs out consistently, and the fireballs will pay for themselves when they're being thrown out. We've even done a fight against the Echo Knight with some fireballs where I was trying to get my mana back as well, or the focus. So I'm going to go over everything in this. We'll go over how to do massive damage with this, what kind of stats you're going to need, what kind of gear we're going to wear, and then also just kind of how to have fun with the build overall. If you see in this fight here, you can counter all sorts of boss abilities by using that falling sky ability. You're able to freeze things in place like the bosses, freeze the enemies in place. And there's a plague staff. If you use the plague staff, you can do a few different kinds of builds. So let's get in the build here, and I'll explain what you guys can do to make a pretty successful mage. All right, guys. So let's go over the gear that you're going to use to do this. If you jump in here, this is the endgame gear we're using. Ended up getting a pretty good gnarled staff with the stats I like, the health and the focus back. False truth with focus back, which is kind of all we could really get. And then a falling sky staff, which is pretty powerful. Here's what we're wearing right now. Seer's cap, a little bit of leather armor, and some cloth. And then I ended up liking to use the 3 focus rings just because it gives me just enough focus to be able to get all my focus back whenever I throw out a fireball. Especially with like a helmet like this. We have 196% focus gain, as you can see. So getting focus back is pretty easy here, but you're not going to get this kind of stats right off the bat. So let's just kind of go over what you're going to do as you're trying to get here. And then I'll show you guys the kind of gear that you can try to work for towards the very end of the game. So as you're leveling, you're going to run into things like what kind of rings can you wear. You're only going to have 1 ring slot to begin with. So try to get something like agility ring here. It just increases your movement speed and lets you run really quick. If you can't use that and you get a rune ring, that's going to increase the damage of your spells. So that's pretty awesome too. In early game, you can even get something like around a level 11, like the Ring of Broken Promises. This increases your damage pretty significantly. Or even a Band of Calmness around level 11. So these are the kind of things you're going to be fishing for. I'll even show you a grouping of rings here that would be good. One thing with a lot of the tests I've had, especially with the rings and whatnot, if you show rings here, the Ring of Broken Promises and the Fierce Ring actually does more damage for your spells with that damage dealt increase than the Rune Ring does. I don't know if that's intended or not, but the rune attacks deal 27% bonus damage. Even though that's 27%, it seems to be less than even the Fierce Ring is. And I'll show you guys that here. So as you're going through the game, you're going to encounter the Gnarled Staff first, which ended up being one of my favorite staffs. It just shoots Fireball out. And then Channel will actually channel your hit points into focus. So if you don't have a lot of hit points yet, using channel might be a little bit detrimental, but it's a way to get focus back without using focus pots. The Cursed Crone here. This is going to be the next staff you can get. The Thunderstrike ability and the Spark's pretty cool. I think that Cursed Crone's pretty nice, especially if you get focus on damage dealt and health on damage dealt with it, because it shoots an AoE lightning attack out. Hits pretty much everything on the screen. It'll be the first kind of AoE attack you get for casting, and it allows you to get a lot of health back pretty quick if there's a lot of targets. And then the final thing is the False Truth here, and that'll be one of the final staffs that you fish for, but it's really expensive. It starts at 9 silver just to buy one from the vendor, so you'll be doing that a little bit later on in your game. Here's the kind of stats that you're going to want on the staff. I think that it's best to do the attacks. Like the one we use here, my attacks were doing extra cold damage, had health back and focus gain. But if you can, try to get something like attacks that do extra damage. I think that the cold damage kind of was a detriment to it. I'm not 100% sure on that yet, but it seems like just raw damage is better. Or plague damage for this particular staff. And then the 14% stamina refill chance on damage dealt. Not needed, especially for spellcasters. But if you do shoot a few spells out and you do a couple attacks, it'll usually refill your stamina back and allow you to roll away without having to use your mana to use Blink. Now, I think best in slot's going to be False Truth in the end, because you can get all the stats you want, like focus back and health back. But to get the Falling Sky Blue blueprint, you can get that from the Enchanter. You'll have to get the Enchanter to the final upgrade, but once you do, you can buy that blueprint, and then you just make the Falling Sky Staff. And once you enchant the staff, it'll actually turn it into the unique. So when you first make it, it'll just be a staff that has those 4 abilities there: the Ice Sweep, Glacial Spike, Hail, and Blink. And then once you actually enchant it, it will get the damage with max focus and the rune attack damage. False Truth also does kind of the same thing. You're able to enchant it. It'll show it only has 2 abilities after you enchant it. But if you relog or if you just equip it, you'll see that you have Pestilence and Plague Nova still there. Alright, as for stats, you'll see here that we're still level only 29. Now, I think that after hitting max level, this is while I was leveling and we're still using a weapon to gain a lot of focus back. I feel like you can kind of forego a lot of points of stamina. And we'll even show you right here. So you can kind of focus on focus gain on your gear, get enough intelligence to wield the weapon, and then get enough hit points and stamina so that you can actually, you know, walk around and live, dodge out of the way. But once you have the blink ability and you have enough focus for it, you can kind of get away with attacking a bit and then blinking away from targets without having to use your stamina. So I wouldn't spec too much into stamina, and I'd really rely a lot more on your focus and your equip load to finish the build out. So as much focus as you can get to try to get to about 500 focus points, maybe even without the rings on. That way you start regenning focus with your fireballs, and you can kind of do unlimited fireballs. As for your weapons, here's what I'm currently using for my weapons and the stats that they have. What I think best in slot would be something like this. And it interchanges the final stat, that 14% stamina refill chance on damage dealt, not required on the weapon or the gloves. It's just the way I like to get my stats. I like to hit and then be able to get that stamina back and roll away without having to use blink and use all my mana for damage or focus. Now, that's what I think a perfect staff would look like. And then those are actually the gloves I'm wearing. As for the gear, here's a few different sets. Here's the first set that I was wearing. Lots of focus gain increased. This helped really well with going through the Crucible the first time. We were able to keep our focus up without having to use any focus pots, really. It's really nice. And then here's the kind of stats that we ended up getting towards the end game. So I really liked relying on having a little bit of stamina on my gear. That way I didn't have to spec into it any further. Overall speed seems to really help with... I think it even helps with casting the spells. It doesn't really say that it does, but it helps with at least being able to run around and just get out of combat and whatnot so you can cast. Focus increase is just as good as getting focus gain. So whichever you get on your gear, I think that focus increased will actually increase your damage in the end. You can do a lot more of your big abilities just over and over again. And then equip load and focus gain that I show on the bottom there is really important. Equip load ends up being very important in this game, so when you do get it on a piece of gear, it's a big deal. It allows you to wear more higher tiers of gear that or not really tiers of gear, but just heavier gear. And you never know what you're going to get. You might have some leather pieces, you might have some cloth pieces, you might even have a plate piece that's like best in slot. So try to get as much equip load as you can.